All right, welcome into another Auburn Live show. I'm Justin Hokanson, joined by Ben Leard. This is the Monday morning quarterback edition of the Auburn Live show. If you're not a subscriber to Auburn Live, auburnlive.com, I think we're running 50% off right now. So I never know when they're going to throw those deals out there. So go check it out, 50% off, and join the auburnlive.com community. Ben, so I just have a script here, and I read it every week. Auburn blows double-digit lead, doesn't score the second half, loses football game. And I just read it every week.
I don't know where to start, Hope. I left the game on Saturday, and of course, as a fan, so I just deflated. When you look at that ball game and you watch how it just kind of gradually unraveled, like it was like watching a slow train wreck. You're up 17-0 versus a pretty inept LSU offense. And in my opinion, I thought the defense played well enough to win the football game. If you look back at it, if I'm not mistaken, they defensively they gave up one sustained touchdown drive, and that in itself was aided by what I consider a BS hands to the face call against Derek Hall on third down. It was tough to walk away from. I mean, obviously the kids played hard, dude. They played hard. They gave it everything they had. Robbie Ashford, everybody needs to have a little dose of reality in the sense that the kid hadn't played very much football in a long time. That was the largest stage that he's obviously ever started a game under. He's about to get introduced to SEC football come this Saturday in a road game in Athens. But I'll tell you where my largest disappointment is the offensive coordinator. There were multiple calls that I'm sitting there thinking, what in the hell is he thinking? What are you doing given the situation? 2 consecutive drives in which you went for it on 4th and 10. One of them you got bailed out by a pass interference call. Like truly bailed out. And in the moment, as good as Auburn's defense was playing at that point in time, and as unlikely as it was for LSU's offense to drive the football, let's say 80 yards, you go for it on 4th and 10 with a passing offense that their best plays at that point up until to that game were scramble, drill, broken plays that Robbie Ashford made athletically to Shanker or Fromm or Johnson or whomever the guys were. They weren't called pass plays. They were just kids being, players being players. And then, dude, the one that took the cake was the late pick that was the double pass. I almost lost it when I saw that. There's zero reason for calling that particular play. Zero. And I don't know. And I said this even under Gus. I put more of the onus within the poor play calling and just quite frankly, the stupid plays that were called. I put more of that on the OC because I truly think he's out of his depth. I do. And there are situations up until this ball game, I thought Smetting was out of his depth as well. This is not an on-the-job learning situation in the SEC, especially when you are doing your best to win football games to keep your job. And I said it about Gus for many, many times when he was making the comments about letting Rhett Lashley call the plays or, whomever they may be. As long as the head coach is wearing a set of headphones, there's somewhat of a subliminal approval by the head coach based on an offensive or defensive scheme or play or, whether you're going for it or you're punting or whatever the scenario may be. Now, first and foremost, I do not know if Harsin has that level of engagement or if he gives his coordinators that much autonomy when it comes down to making the plays or calling the plays. But when it comes down to it, watching that game, especially late with 3 collective turnovers in the fourth quarter, 2 of which came from the offense, that'd be the first change I'd make. Is I would immediately make an adjustment at the offensive coordinator spot and see what happens, because I think everybody can look at the schedule and everybody can see the performance thus far, and the outlook is extremely grim. It's really, really grim. And that is hard for me to say because, gosh, I don't think I think there are very few people that have more desire to see these kids win than I do. And it's about the kids. And I know how hard Brian Harsin works. I know how much devotion he has to those kids and this football team. And it's not a question of that, because I like Brian Harsin. I think he is a good football coach. But at this point, if you are someone that has a negative taste in your mouth about this football program and Brian Harsin, it is 100% the perfect storm, because it doesn't matter how good a football coach he is at this point. It doesn't. They are about to go on a gauntlet, and it does not look good at the likelihood of them winning more than one, if just one, of these games. Western Kentucky, at the time that it comes, is going to be a difficult task, because it is likely that these young men will have suffered multiple losses consecutively. And who's to say what do you do at that point? I don't know, man. It's hard for me to pull out any positives, that's for sure. And I want to not get too fired up and start beating people up and jumping on them and saying this and that, because I'm not in the meeting rooms, I'm not on the sidelines, but I do. My strongest opinion is the lack of performance and an absolute horrendous play calling that was done on Sunday. That was a winnable game. Auburn should have beaten LSU, hands down.
Question. No question.
And I truly, truly, truly believe defensively Auburn played well enough to win that football game. They did. Offense, not even offensive performance, offensive play calling cost Auburn that football game, period.
Well, and the turnovers, to me, again, it just I don't, they just get careless. They lose their focus. Robbie Ashford's still a young player, so the strip fumble defensive touchdown for LSU was costly, unfortunate, but again, got to feel that pressure. It's something that more experienced quarterbacks probably do, and he doesn't do. He throws a pick, with a few minutes left in the game, stares down the receiver. The guy jumped the route, and then he had a few more fumbles in that game that he fortunately didn't lose. as good as Robbie played and the plays he made, it shows you how far he still has to come as a young quarterback. He still made a ton of mistakes, a ton of costly mistakes. And then, rushing the football, LSU is the better. Like if I told you, hey, Auburn's going to be -3 in turnovers and they're going to be outrushed, you'd be like, well, they're going to lose. And that's the only thing LSU did well. They didn't turn the ball over until the very end, and they rushed the ball pretty well against Auburn. But yeah, it's there for most of the game. I was sitting there thinking, you know what? There's not really much I could say about the coaching and the game plan in this one. Everything looks good. I mean, for most of the game, for a lot of the game, you're thinking defense is playing well, offense is doing their best to create opportunities. But you could see it coming at halftime, man. I mean, I was up in the press box and talking to people, and I'm just like, look, I'm telling you what's about to happen. I mean, you could just see it coming. Auburn wasn't running the ball all that well. They had hit big plays in the passing game, but some of those were scramble, rollout, broken plays. As halftime neared, at one point, Robbie Ashford only had one pass play of 10 yards over like a 6 or 7 throw span, whereas the first 7 passes he completed were over 10 yards. So you could already see a trend happening with Ashford and big plays, and that was coming down. You're like, LSU's not going to continue to bust coverages in the back, and Auburn's not running the ball that well. And that's why the end of the first half was so devastating, man. That hands to the face to give them the ball back, and then allowing LSU to drive was just massive. It was such a huge call. I mean, if that goes the other way and they don't call that and Auburn gets the ball back and just manages a field goal, it's just such a different game. But it's yet again the lack of focus, mainly on the offensive side of the ball in the second half. The lack of execution. I mean, there's not an answer. There's not a good answer. And Brian Harsin has asked that over and over again. And every time his answer is basically not an answer. It's like we're aware of it. We're aware of the second half struggles. It's something we got to work on. I'm like, dude, you're 18 games into your career at Auburn, but this is like 9 games of competition. This isn't 2 or 3 games, in a row. You can't keep saying we're aware of it. Like, you're aware of what? The fact that for half of the game, you're saying offense. It really was more than that. If you go look at it, they had all 17 points by 9.5 minutes in the second quarter. It wasn't just the first half, second half. It might as well have been 40 minutes for 60 minutes. It was worse than just 30 and 30. I mean, 9:30, I rewatched the game, 9:30, Auburn scores 17. I'm like, well, they're done. They won't score for the rest of the game. And which is shocking, which is just crazy. And I can't explain that other than the only thing I go back to is they consistently can't run the football. And so when you can't do that, your offense is it's going to rely on good execution or big plays in the first half. You catch them and stuff. You run some new things. You've got a little juice, and you go out there and you catch them. And then as soon as the defense adjusts to some things you're doing, it's over because you can't run the football consistently. Which that no matter what the defense thinks you're doing, if you run the ball right, that can create so many things for your offense. They can't do it. So you take that away and you take away creativity in the passing game once teams adjust, and it's like it's over with. And it's over and over. It happens over and over again. It's to the point where unless Auburn's up they were up 28-3 against Mississippi State, and even that lead wasn't safe. So I don't know what lead would be safe, but I'm with you that he's not a bad coach. And he's not. There's been good examples of decent football. I just, how they continue to blow these leads and play offensively it's just kind of mind-blowing that it happens over and over again. And you're right, defensively, LSU didn't even have 300 yards of offense. In this day and age, you hold an offense to 200, anywhere in the 200s, that is phenomenal in this day and age, man. That's phenomenal. I mean, Missouri had over 300 yards of offense. Wish Auburn could force more turnovers, but gosh, they forced 9 punts and a turnover in 12 possessions. 9 punts and a turnover in 12 possessions. Uh, 38% passing for LSU. Now LSU's dropping some balls, things like that. But I think LSU was 30% on third down. They were really bad in the first half. Defense can't do any more in this day and age against a mobile quarterback, good offense. They did everything they're supposed to do, really. And it's just not going to hold up. The more the offense plays like that, the defense is just they're not going to play like that every game. It's just not going to happen.
Well, and the turnover was extremely timely from the standpoint of the defense creating that turnover. I mean, it was like fumble on demand. Coffin made just a phenomenal play on the ball. Timed his blitz absolutely perfectly. Jason Jones recovers the fumble and gave Auburn the opportunity to drive the football and win the game. And, like you said, up until that pass attempt where Robbie just stared down the stop route on, in the middle of the box. And, granted, the kid from LSU made a phenomenal play on the ball, pulled it away from the receiver. I mean, you got to give him credit, but still defensively, they played well enough to win that game. Offensively, you're right, man. You're looking at a 17-point lead, and there is zero comfort in that. Zero. And you can't help but think that an opposing coach, part of their arsenal or their verbiage to their young men is, guys, they start fast. They start fast. Just weather the storm initially, and you'll be fine. If they're up 28, if they're up 17, if they're up 10, whatever the scenario may be, just hang in there and it'll eventually turn, especially in the second half. Oh, and if you don't believe me, here, I'll show you their last, 6 SEC games. If I'm not mistaken, and I don't know exactly what the statistic is, but Auburn has had double-digit leads in the second half of the last, I think, 5 or 6 SEC matchups, and have not come out victorious in those. And, man, that's not good at all. And I just don't understand where the miss is. I just don't get where you don't have the ability to step on somebody's throat and finish a game. Period. Sustain a drive, run the football, make good offensive play calls, give your guys opportunities to win. I mean, you go back and think about it, Hope. They had the ball 1st and goal on the 5-yard line. And they Robbie's fumble there put him at 2nd and goal from the 10. So that was on him 100%. He had more than those.
I think that fumble is overlooked in terms of how I think that fumble impacted the next play call.
I do too. I definitely do. But I still don't think that's the play call. It's
super risky. I mean,
it's unbelievably risky. It is, I don't think in that moment that's the play. All right, let's think about it. Think about this. Now, granted, this is a major variable as poorly as Anders is kicking right now, but let's say you have in the back of your mind, don't do anything stupid. Let's at least play for 21-20. As good as the defense is playing, we'll get the ball back and have an opportunity to drive and kick a walk-off field goal. But
why not just say we're going for it? I mean, just say, look, we're going to play 4 downs, and then if we don't get it, we're going to give them the ball at the 5, and we're going to trust our defense. We don't need to run trick plays. We're going to run the best 4 plays we can run.
And hey, and look, at that time, we're talking about poor execution in the run game. At that time, they had gashed him a little bit with Jarquez in the run game. He was getting 3 and 4 yards a pop. A lot of it was on his own, but they were making some positive strides in the run game on that specific drive and were able to find some success. It's just so difficult with a condensed field to make those types of plays off of a kid that doesn't throw the ball, doesn't understand the brevity of reading a defensive secondary and all of those kind of things. It just the moment in that scenario is not when you give a receiver the ball to make the play of the game. It's just not. And I agree
Which,
with
by
you.
the way, he can't just chunk it away like a quarterback. I think there's rules about grounding with
There is. If you are not, if you are the second person basically to touch the football, right, on a backwards pass, on a lateral pass, there is no ability for you to ground the football, to throw it away. It is either a complete pass, an incomplete pass, an interception, or a sack. So, I mean, the young man didn't have a whole lot of options. Now, granted, the throw was horrible. There was nobody within 20
But again,
yards.
that's coaching. Like, that's where you say, hey, look, if you get that ball and you get swarmed, if they're on it, whatever, you just go down. Just go down. We're not losing yards. Just go down. And I mean, again, there's no coaching there. There's no coaching point there. Clearly,
I agree. But you know, like you had said, the better point is you got 2nd and goal from the 10. You've already gone for it on 2 4th and 10s. So that would lead you to believe that you have 3 more downs remaining to score, right? And then you call that. I just
no game plan there. No real strategy. I mean, it should have been 4 downs.
Yeah.
And I get Robbie. I get some of the thought, right? We're not. It's harder to run the ball inside the 10. Okay. Robbie's still an inaccurate passer. He's still young and inexperienced. Okay, so what we don't want to do is have him try to read things in the middle of the field. Okay, we don't want him to force it. Okay, but you still got roll him out 4 times and do one route. Say roll out, try to find one guy on that route. Okay, or run the option, and maybe you can pitch it to Tank or Jarquez or somebody. Maybe they can get the corner and get to the pylon. Or like I feel like there's a number of things you could have done to just try to keep it one-on-one. Run a quarterback draw, run some power up the middle on 2nd down and try to get back closer. I mean, there's just things you could have done. Would it have been conservative-ish? Yeah. You got to play to what you don't want Robbie. You don't put too much on him there, but that play call wasn't. That's if you're playing. Hey, we got 4 downs. You don't run that play.
Yeah,
I mean,
there
there's no
were
way you run that play.
There were instances, and I believe this happened on this drive, and I think that the play, that the interception that Coy threw, I believe, did that come on 3rd down because on the 2nd and goal was an attempted flat pass, an angle pass to Jarquez. And defensively, they just made a good read on it, or that may have been before that. But there are just so many other things they could have done with Robbie Ashford, with how athletic he is, to give them a better opportunity for success. I mean,
yeah,
you could tell in watching the game, you could tell that defensively LSU was coached up very, very well to defend an inexperienced mobile quarterback for the most part. I mean, they obviously popped off some big plays in the pass game. Guys got lost and Robbie was able to find them, but on just, called orchestrated rollouts, moving him out of the pocket, defenders knew by process of elimination where to go and what they could eliminate. There were multiple times that Auburn would roll to the right or left with maybe a two receiver scheme or a 2 route scheme. And odds are, for example, Robbie rolls to his right it's highly likely roughly 90+% of the attempts that come out of that rolling to the right are going to be out routes in that same direction, out routes, corner routes, out cuts. Well, defensively, LSU did a great job of undercutting those particular routes. And I think that ultimately in certain instances cost them because they'd undercut them and leave the top off. And so, when you get into that scramble drill, that leaves some guys open over the top of the defense. But, you could tell they were prepared to play against a kid that didn't have a whole lot of experience, has a really live arm, but, is, feast or famine. But man, I just
you've got a 6'5" receiver over there that literally, Landon King, his only role on this team is situational. He's not there yet as a receiver, but he is a situational guy. What better situation than when you're down there in that opportunity? How do you not dial that up before you're running trick plays? How do you not say, Landon, we're lining you up 1-on-1, and it's going to be pretty obvious, and we're going to throw it up, and you're going to catch it, or maybe they're going to fight you and we're going to get a pass interference?
Well, I mean, hey, even if it's not Landon
King,
even if it's not Landon King, how about Cam Brown? There's two guys on that roster, and it still baffles me to this day why they don't execute the fade ball or the jump ball any better than they do, or call it for that term, for lack of a better term. But it's a hell of a lot more likely to be successful than the double pass, to a receiver that never throws the ball.
Yeah.
And I know there's tons of other situations that could have led to better success. I do. We're harping on one play, but cumulatively, I think it was a poor effort by the offensive coordinator and his play calls, and I don't see it. I haven't seen it for quite some time, and I'm a proponent of Brian Harsin from the standpoint of I really think he's a good football coach. I think he's a great disciplinarian. The kids love him because they see how hard he works. They see that he is passionate about them being successful. But unfortunately, man, the deck is stacked against everything at this point.
Yeah.
And it's going to be impossible sledding for them when you think about going to Athens, going to Oxford, then Arkansas, A&M. Granted, there's some hopefulness in the fact that maybe A&M continues to slide and they come in on one leg. You never know.
But their defense is still really good.
No doubt. You're exactly right. So, and they're, with A-Chain at the running back position, they're likely to pop 2 or 3 big plays. So at this point, anybody that scores 21 points on Auburn, you can chalk it up.
Feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to be the underdog, and every other than Western Kentucky, you're going to be the underdog in probably every game across the board. And we'll move on. But I think what you're getting at about the play calling is it's just between the 4th and 10. And by the way, the next 4th and 10, he had to go for it. I mean, when it was 3rd down and when they didn't get it, I looked at somebody next to me and I said, well, he's got to go for this. He just went for it. He has no choice. Yeah, he can't not go for this.
You already set the precedent. You got to do it.
Yeah. So it was just, I think, in critical situations, in that 4th and 10 they didn't get, what made it worse was they called a timeout. They call a timeout. They had no idea what to do. It's 3rd and 10. They're like, do we go? They didn't know what to do, so they call timeout. At that point, you better go for it. And then they go for it, and the play they come up with was a nothing play, which was maybe worse. Like I don't agree with going for it because they had the lead at the time, and yeah, anyway. But it was that, and just odd play callings at critical times. That's the thing. Critical times, weird, odd, kind of super risky, super aggressive, didn't look like it was a well thought out play at the most critical times. That's the most disturbing. But here's your stat, right? So going back to Ole Miss of last year, when they scored 28 first half points against top 10 Ole Miss, okay? From that game, Ole Miss, they scored 3 points second half. A&M the next game, shutout second half. Mississippi State the next game, 6 points in the second half. South Carolina, 3. Alabama, 3. Houston, 10. A really good third quarter against Houston. Abysmal fourth quarter. They lost the game. Then you come to Penn State, 6. Missouri, 0. LSU, 0. And I looked it up after the game, and I've dug deeper into those stats. From Ole Miss to now, in the second halves of football games, they've punted the ball 20, I think they're up to 28 times. 28 punts in the second half in that stretch. 3 touchdowns. 8 turnovers. So they're damn near 3 times more likely to turn the ball over in the second half than score a touchdown. And they're basically 9 times more likely to punt the ball than score a touchdown in the second half. That's
not good.
How bad it is. You can basically bank on maybe a field goal, better chance of a turnover, and a high likelihood of quite a few punts. I mean, just bank on it. And still, by the way, back to South Carolina, Penn State, Missouri, now the last 6 big games, excluding Mercer, San Jose State, those 6 now, they are still 0 for third down in the fourth quarter. In that stretch, no fourth quarter third down conversions, none. I think 0 for 17 now. Isn't that crazy? They don't have a third down conversion in the fourth quarter since Mississippi State.
Wow. Wow. Oh, well, there's your answer.
It's hard to fathom.
There's your answer.
Which is crazy when we talk about this staff. Like, think about if just they hold on to most of these leads. Like Mississippi State, what if they hold on to that lead? South Carolina, what if they hold on to that lead? Alabama, what if they hold on to that lead? LSU, hold on to that lead. Like, what are we talking about with Brian Harsin? What are we talking about with this record? I mean, it's just a completely different story.
Yeah.
Completely different story.
You're in true Auburn fashion, we're talking about an extension, not a firing.
Yeah, probably.
And I don't. I mean, in my opinion, that's coaching.
Has to be. It has to be.
Because the kids they're losing focus. They're not making adjustments. Those are coaching level scenarios, because it's not like you had the same performance in the first half, right? It's the same kids that made the same plays in quarters 1 and 2. So at some point, your message is not strong enough to these young men to maintain focus in quarters 3 and 4, and make adjustments to not permit the opponent to come back and win the football game. I mean, I don't know where to put that finger. Is it each individual position coach? It can't all, in my opinion, it's not going to all fall on the head coach, because there's only so many people that he can speak to and have and resonate with, but it does start there. It doesn't happen just on Saturday. It's Sunday through Friday. So, but there is an area that you go back and think of the lack of adjustments, the lack of improvement from quarters 2 to quarter 3 at the half, those types of things. But again, that is an area that I would point more towards the coordinators than I would a head coach. Now, people will say, "Well, he hired them." No, you're right, and he'll acknowledge that. That's just the type of coach Harsin is. That he'll ride or die with whomever he chose as his position coaches and coordinators. But the way it works at halftime, Brian Harsin is not bouncing all around the locker room, delivering a sermon to the defense, beating on the whiteboard and making adjustments. And then he's not jumping over to the offense doing the exact same thing. The man doesn't have time for that. They separate offense and defense. What they do is they walk into the locker room. The staff goes into a room. They might separate within that room a little bit. Hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're seeing. You've got analysts coming from all different directions, GAs coming from different directions. Position coaches coming here saying Tank is seeing this and Coy is seeing this and Brandon Council's seeing this on the defensive front. And then on the flip side, you've got the defensive guys doing the same thing. Well, halftime is only so long. So then the coaches, they break. They're like, all right, let's go. Get your guys. Hey, they come busting out into the locker room. Hey, defense over here, offense over here. Everybody get around. And they start talking about, hey, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this good, doing this bad. This adjustment needs to be done here. This adjustment needs to be done there. It is an absolute free-for-all. It is organized chaos. And it's not Brian Harsin that's delivering that message. It is the coordinators that are talking about adjustments, or in our opinion, lack thereof. And then within the last 30 seconds, minute before the kids come back onto the field, they all congregate one last time. Brian Harsin gives a hoorah speech of finishing the game. The last 30 minutes, the first 5 minutes of the second half are the most important. Is the most important time of the entire ball game. Blah 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 blah. Ready, break, war, damn eagle. It is a coordinator's job to make adjustments at the half, because they have that. Although it's a finite, condensed period of time, they have the undivided attention of their side of the ball. It's not Brian Harsin. It's the coordinators. And at this point, they have failed egregiously, dating back to Mike Bobo and Derek Mason, and now Schmedding and Keesaw. It's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. Most importantly for those kids.
Yeah, it was an awesome atmosphere. It was a big time atmosphere. It was a big time game. Recruits loved it. Despite the result, recruits had great things to say. And that's what, I've told our board this, like, hey, look, things are just, this is going to work out, it'll be okay. I mean, if you, I know it sucks. You want to win football games. It's not a complete disaster in terms of, where the Auburn program is. They have to make good decisions here in the next couple of months. But, you've got a $100 million facility it's about to open, and you still got, obviously, an environment like that. There's still so many awesome things. You just got to make a few good decisions here, and clearly decisions are going to have to be made, because it's not working. And, yeah, I go back to you, man. I would ask Brian Harsin this question, but I feel like I know what the answer is going to be, which is a lot of just words that don't really say anything. It'll be a lot of high level, lofty, rhetoric, but you just go back to these offensive struggles and you try to find what's the same. I can go back to Ole Miss. Well, you've had different quarterbacks. You've had multiple different starting quarterbacks. You've had multiple offensive coordinators. So it's not like, it's not just Keesaw, but Bobo struggled with it too. It's not just Ashford. TJ Finley struggled with it, and even Bo Nix had 3 games really. I mean, Bo Nix got hurt at the end of that Mississippi State game, really. So even Bo had that 3-game stretch back then of poor second half offense. And the only thing consistent I can find is Brian Harsin and the lack of a consistent running game. Like second half, they can't really run the ball. Even if teams know it, they can't push anybody around. That's it. And I just think it comes back to that. When you can't push anybody around, you can't rely on big plays all game, and it just you start losing juice. You start losing momentum. You start losing focus. You start losing some of that stuff you have in the first half, and it just you can't execute. You can't execute in the second half.
I hate to say this too, but prime example of championship level football, top to bottom. If you go back and look at the film and see the Alabama-Arkansas game.
I knew you were going there.
when Arkansas closed it to within a 1-score game, 23-28, what did Alabama do? They ran the damn football, and they did it well. If I'm not mistaken, in the fourth quarter, maybe the late part of the third quarter and the fourth, they broke 2 70-yarders in the run game. They did this with a backup quarterback. Now, granted, he looks like Hercules, but they run the football.
Mm-hmm.
That is Auburn cannot do that right now. Now, I will say this: I liked the restructuring of the offensive front. I thought that is a better lineup and could lead to some success, but it's got a long way to go before it gets on the level that it should be. And you have got to be able to have a running game that, for all intent and purposes, can line up at the line of scrimmage, look across that front seven, and stare in the eyes of the defensive linemen and the linebackers and say, hey, guys, I don't really give a damn what you think or where you go or what you do. I'm running the football right here, and you will not stop us. We're going to get 2 or 3 yards, guaranteed. Put them all right there. That's where we're going. Auburn does not have that. They haven't had that in quite some time. And in my opinion, it is no fault, none whatsoever, of Tank Bigsby, Jarquez Hunter, and Damari Austin. It ain't their bad. Starts up front.
Well, now you go to second-ranked Georgia. They're going to be plenty pissed off after a bad showing in Missouri. Kirby Smart's going to have their complete focus this week, which is really bad news for Auburn. You don't coast through Missouri. Everything's great over there. I mean, they almost got beat. Now, can Auburn look at what Missouri did? Sure. But you're going to have just a dialed-in Georgia team this week after that. And I think it's going to be a baptism by fire for Robbie Ashford and that new-look offensive line. He's going to be running for his life quite often. And you just you hope it doesn't get out of control or too ugly too quick. But where do you go from here? I mean, you got 2 road games coming up, Ole Miss top 10 as well. Your next 2 opponents are top 10 teams on the road, which is why you couldn't start off 3-2, but that's what Auburn did. Brian Harsin's future is I say up in the air. I don't think it is. I think we all know that. It's just a matter of when, how. It's just a weird time right now. You had those home games at least. Okay, well, at least Penn State's at home, right? Missouri's at home. LSU's at home. You had some optimism. Now you get into the tough part of the schedule, including 2 road games where, boy, it's going to be really hard to stay optimistic these next two weeks. Then you got a bye week, which potentially could be a good result of coaching change. I don't know. I'm not making the decisions up there, but it's very possible. I mean, the next 3 weeks.
I mean, at this point, who is making the decisions? That's the problem that Auburn is facing right now because they're at
always
such
a fair question.
there's such a huge crossroads in the sense that you've got a lame duck AD, in Rich McGlynn, and that, so they're obviously in search of a guy to lead the entire department. Do you just pull the Band-Aid off and make a coaching change midstream during an open date? Because it is highly likely that Auburn going into the open date is 3-4. Now, granted, there are a lot of people that will tell you that they saw that coming. Me, for all intent and purposes, I fully expected Auburn to be 5-0 at this point. I did. I truly, truly did. Given where the games were being played, given the opponents and where they are with regards to their football program. And I thought that would be a good enough shot in the arm to allow Auburn to come out with some type of positivity or something to lead them through the second half of the season against teams like Ole Miss, Mississippi State, A&M, and Arkansas. But unfortunately, as I am a lot of times, was way wrong in my hopes and dreams and aspirations for this particular football season. But I just don't know. I don't know that you make a coaching change. And here's the other thing. Typically, your interim, let's say you do fire your head coach. Typically, the interim turns out to be one of the coordinators, right?
Yeah, that's not happening.
Oh, my God. I mean, you might as well go pluck a guy off Tiger Walk.
Well, it'll probably be Zach.
He's
the most logical choice, and it'll probably be Zach.
It should be. It should be. And I would, I love Zach Etheridge to death. I think he's a hell of a ball coach. He's a great recruiter. He's a great leader of men. And I would support that, wholeheartedly. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, and I wouldn't say anything about any coach that I wouldn't say to their face. I hope that they compete on Saturday, and at least don't get run away with. Find a way to win in Oxford some way, somehow, and go on some type of miraculous run. And we're wondering, holy crap, did that LSU game just wake up the Tigers? But, man, my doubts are overriding my orange and blue glasses.
Well, they should. I mean, you're just based on the evidence. They should. I mean, based on the evidence we knew. So that's why at halftime at LSU, I was like, just looking at what's been happening, you feel like you know exactly where this is going. Let me ask you this: as a player, how would you feel? Because this is what I go back to about, when I'm trying to figure out if they're going to make a change. And look, ultimately, if a change is made, it sounds harsh, but they're not going to care what the players think. Like, it's a big business decision, but I think it plays a small part. Like, I think they'll say, look, for instance, hey, let's make a change right now. I think part of it would go, guys, we can't do that to them when they're about to go to Georgia. That we can't do that to the team, the players. Like, I think there's an element of that. How do you react as a player? Like Carson, look, the group that's here chose to come back. They didn't transfer. They're here. Most of them, not everybody. Not everybody likes everybody. That's never going to happen. But the majority of that team likes Brian Harsin. Certainly the leaders and the people that control the vibe, I think, for the most part, do. How do you think they'll take it, and how would you take it if you loved a coach, you loved his mission, you loved his vision, you loved how he pushed the team, all that stuff, and then they fire him midseason? How do you react to that? Are you a young kid? You're like, yeah, it sucks. Like, are we probably looking at it very differently from them? They're just playing ball. How do you think it impacts them if that change happens?
I think it definitely has an impact on the young men, and there's going to be those, as it in the world that they live in now regarding the fishbowl and social media and having the ability to be keyboard warriors. There's going to be some like Derek and Colby and those guys that are might have a negative thing to say about, the departure of Brian Harsin or the decision, but then there's probably going to be those that, good riddance, because they're not getting the opportunity that they think they deserve. But that's going to be the case. You're not always going to have everybody be happy, but and this is really ambiguous when I make this statement, but I think that the thoughts and feelings that will come out of the young men is really dependent on the outcome of really the next two ball games. If they get their doors blown off and they themselves get the sense that the coaching staff or certain coaches are just buying their time, that you cannot mask that. The kids will see that. They will feel it. They will sense it, just like they can tell if you don't love them or don't support them. So they will be happy to show you the door. Happy to. Now, if they are hard-fought games, they see the coaches still punching the clock, doing the things that they're doing, and they're truly devoted to them as players and young men, most importantly, as they should be, because they're still getting a paycheck. Then you might have a little backlash from guys like Derek or Colby or whomever they may be. But those are difficult decisions, are going to get varying responses. And, in my opinion, I personally don't see an advantage other than the recruiting deadline in December. I don't see the advantage of cutting ties midseason. People can argue the fact that, you don't want to do it after the Iron Bowl because then you have an early December commitment period or signing period. You're only a couple of weeks in for the new coach with the ability to make, salvage some recruiting, blah, 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 blah. I get that. But, I mean, really, what good is it? And I just don't know. Again, I'm not making the call or I'm not making the decision, but I just don't know how good or how much it helps the scenario by firing someone in the middle of the season. I think there's more negative that comes out of it than positive.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be a money thing because the difference between firing Brian Harsin right this second and the end of the year is like $600,000. So it's not enough to really sway you one way or another. I would say the positives would be you make it known that you have an opening. I would think it becomes a little easier to back channel talk to coaches. There could be some reluctance now, like even if it's back channels, and we know that happens. Hey, you still got a coach. Being wide open, I think, makes it a little bit easier maybe to back channel and talk to kind of anybody you want. But past that, they're the people they're looking at, they're not going to hire midseason anyway. They need to get an AD on board or at least get an AD named. And then I think the other aspect is just, like you said, do these next 2 weeks, if they go really, really poorly, does the negativity from the fan base, does the negativity that you're reading column after column, story after story about what's Auburn waiting on? Fire the guy. Does that become a thing where you're just like, I'm sick of, I can't go through another 2 months basically, or 7-8 weeks of just limbo, negative talk from the fans. They just don't want to deal with it. They got to cut the strings and start to shift the focus. Again, that's a lot of perspective, and it's not really going to affect recruiting. I mean, the other thing would be recruiting. Look, I mean, are they going to land anybody? Maybe. Shoot, they're still landing kids here and there, which is kind of wild. I mean, you do still have a staff going out and making visits. You still have kids that are interested in Auburn because they don't pay attention to things close enough. They don't really know if Brian Harsin's in or out or what's going on there. It probably has a little bit of negative effect on recruiting because as soon as you him, until if you want, And so they're all just going to wait and see. And so if you do keep them around, you maybe at least keep a little bit more interest with these kids. Whereas if you fire them, you can pretty much just hang it up until you get somebody new. So, I mean, yeah, I can kind of see your point. I mean, there's definitely some reasons to keep him and some reasons to just move on it. And maybe that's where they're at. Maybe they're just like sort of playing it almost week by week, or, hey, if it gets so bad that we just need to make a change, or what if they're competitive? And do we just kind of keep kicking the can down the road for a little bit,
Yeah. It's a difficult proposition for sure, because you just there is no 100% correct answer. It's a lot of it is what your gut feel. A lot of it is how will this decision or lack thereof, it's the tail wagging the dog, right? It's how will this impact the kids that are being recruited at this point? How will it affect the kids on the roster presently? Because you obviously have to be concerned with the transfer portal. There could be a mass exodus one way or the other. If he stays, if for some reason they decide to keep Brian Harsin as the head coach, it's just that's going to happen. Those are things that are already, that there's going to be additions, subtractions, good, bad, and ugly, one way or the other. But it's just, it's not a good position for Auburn football to be in. It's disappointing, to say the least. They've got a long way to go. Do they have the ability to turn it around? I just don't know, man. And it's not going to be for lack of effort. I can guarantee you that. It's not going to be because these kids don't care. They care. They want to win football games. But I just don't know if they have enough dudes to win the games that they need to win. And at this point, they need to win every one of them.
Yeah. Well, another super uplifting, positive, inspiring Monday morning quarterback. I love him. I love him so much. But it is what it is. It is what it is. I mean, it's not just that Auburn's losing football games. It's that Auburn's losing football games, and you have a head coach and everything hanging over it. It's not a guy who's in his third year and everything's been fine and they're going through a little rough patch. It's a combination of on the field and you're staring at a change happening. So there's just a lot to digest and dissect and wrap your head around about kind of how you feel about all this stuff. And the collapses make it even worse. Not just they're losing. It's just these baffling decisions and losses. It just, everything about trying to talk about Auburn football in the program right now is exhausting. Yep. It really is. Like, everything about it is mentally exhausting. So we'll see, man. They got Georgia this week, CBS, 4-touchdown underdog. Just 4-touchdown underdog to one of your biggest rivals on the road is brutal. So we'll see how it goes, man. We'll see how it goes. I don't know what you hope. I guess you just hope to make a few plays and have a few plays that you remember from this one and get out of there healthy. Maybe it's 38-10. Like, I would probably take that at this point. I mean, Georgia walked in here last year and beat Auburn 34-10. I mean, that ended up being the final. Jordan Hare. Auburn played well for 3 quarters. They just couldn't hang in there, but I think it still ended up being like 34-10.
Yeah.
Well, hey, look, this week's going to be phenomenal. Okay, so that's going to be great. So just everybody, go have a good lunch, enjoy the weather. Everything will be okay. Everything will be okay in the long run. Just kind of sort of push through what you got going on right now.
That's right, baby. Just live to play another day.
If there's one thing we know about Auburn football, They will always live to play another day, and it won't be that long. I mean, you go back to 98, 99, 2000, boom, you know, 09 to 10, 12 to 13. It can happen quick at Auburn. It can happen really quick. So that's the bright side. And you just keep that kind of in the forefront of your mind. It can happen very quickly at Auburn to turn around. So, all right, man. Well, we'll do this again next Monday after Georgia. Appreciate everybody joining us. AuburnLive.com, 50% off subscriptions. Go join the AuburnLive.com community. For Ben Leard, I'm Justin Hokanson, and we'll catch you next time. See ya.